start our stream. And so we have started the stream. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Dental Shadowers virtual shadowing session. Today we have with us Dr. Anderson. She is an orthodontist and she has prepared a great presentation for us. And so Dr. Anderson, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Krupa. Hey, everyone. I am Dr. Rebecca Anderson. I go by Becca. I am an orthodontist in Charleston, South Carolina. So I put together, it's really a pretty casual presentation for you guys tonight. We'll do a little bit of clinical stuff and then also just a lot of practical information that I feel like was super helpful to me when I was in, the pre-dental shoes or even the pre-residency shoes. Again, this is so casual. So if you've got any questions along the way, I know Kathleen's going to read them out from the YouTube platform. So please feel free to stop me with any questions. I'm an open book. I'll also include all my contact info and email address and social media handles at the end of this. Really, for real, reach out to me if you need anything, throughout your process. I've had so many people help me when I was in your shoes, so I'm happy to do the same thing. So without further ado, again, this is really casual, but just a little bit of information about me, and hopefully you'll get something helpful out of it. So let's see. So this is me. I am originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. So if you're not familiar with the Carolinas, I've got a little map on there for you. And I'm currently in Charleston, South Carolina. So they're like a 3-hour drive from each other, not too far. But I am on the coast now, which is nice. If you've not been to Charleston, you should absolutely visit once all of this COVID stuff goes away, because it's beautiful down here. That's a picture of me and my husband, Ryan. He is super wonderful, so he had to make a presentation. And then I have a big golden doodle named Cooper. He's absolutely crazy, but that's him over there on the screen as well. So just a little bit about my education. I went to UNC Chapel Hill for undergrad. Like I said, I'm from Charlotte, so that was an in-state university for me. I majored in chemistry and totally love chemistry. It just knocked out a bunch of the pre-dental courses, and I knew ultimately I wanted to do dental school. So that's how I ended up with that, I guess. But don't ask me any chemistry questions because I have no clue. I went on to Boston University after Chapel Hill. I did a 1-year Master in Medical Sciences program, just as a gap between college and dental school. And I loved it. It was fantastic. We actually, I don't know if it's the same anymore, but the program that I did at BU actually let you take some of the first year dental classes with the first year dental students. So I took, I think it was biochem and physiology and maybe 1 or 2 other classes with all the first year dental students. So that was really wonderful just to get kind of the temperature on what dental school was really like. And I got to prove myself a little bit in those classes too. So I loved that year. And as a result, loved Boston and BU so much that I ended up staying for dental school. So did my 4 years there and got my DMD degree. There is a picture there in the middle of the screen with a bunch of my best friends from dental school. Our class scrub color was this awful Barney purple, which I think they have since retired. But oh my gosh, we had the best time. And that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for all of you, whatever stage of this process you're in is, it can be daunting and it's a long process, but really, really enjoy all of it. I mean, along the way, I met some of my very, very best friends, and we had, way too much fun sometimes. So enjoy it, even though, it's a lot of work and it can be stressful, but really enjoy yourself is one of my biggest pieces of advice. So anyway, after BU, I had been in Boston for 5 years, and being from the Carolinas, I was just done with the snow to some extent. So when I was applying for ortho residency, Ryan and I were really looking at, getting back down south, closer to family and, out of the snow a little bit too. So I applied all over not all over, mostly on the East Coast, and really try to concentrate on the Southeast. And we'll talk about that a little bit later too, about some of my advice for where you should be applying. But ultimately matched at the Medical University of South Carolina. We call it MUSC down here, for ortho residency. So I got my Master of Science in Dentistry and my certificate in ortho from MUSC. And then in the black scrubs, those were my 2 co-residents in ortho. So again, some really wonderful people, which honestly is the best part of dentistry, is just all the great people that you get to have relationships with. So as I know a lot of you guys are pre-dental, I wanted to talk a little bit about the schools. I truly cannot say enough wonderful things about everywhere that I did all my dental education. So BU's dental school is called the Henry M. Goldman School of Dental Medicine. It's located, if you're familiar with Boston, it's right in downtown, in the South End neighborhood. And it's associated with Boston Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma hospital. So you get to see a lot of really cool stuff, even in your oral surgery rotations and things like that. And they have a really strong medical school too. So we, did a lot of our cadaver labs kind of with the medical students and things. So I loved it so much. They also just did a massive renovation, which was completed, since I've been there. So this is a picture of one of their new clinical areas, which is a huge upgrade from where I was. But if I loved it as much as I did when the clinics did not look this pristine, I can only imagine how great it is today. It is a private school, so we can talk about that too if people have questions about, tuition and the cost of dental education, because it is hefty. And obviously, in-state, out-of-state, private school, all of that comes into play. So BU was pricey, but again, I so loved my experience. I would not change it, despite the tuition that I paid. The classes, the dental student classes, were about 120. So they're really big classes at BU, which I actually loved. I came from, again, UNC Chapel Hill, which was massive. So even my 120 person dental student class felt tiny, and, kind of intimate. So really got to know everybody super well. And another cool thing that BU does is they have a traditional 4-year DMD program, which is just the students from the United States who have graduated college and are going into their dental school, that traditional route. They also do an advanced standing program, which is for internationally trained doctors who, are already doctors in a different country. And then to come get their dental license in the US can do sort of an abbreviated version where they're really heavy on all the clinical stuff. So BU offers both of those programs. So that was another thing I loved about BU was all the diversity. We got to meet, we took all of our classes with the advanced standing students, and we were in clinic with them as we were all finishing up all of our requirements for graduation. So we got to learn so much about, how they practice dentistry anywhere. There are countries from all over the world that are represented. So I thought that was a really great part of, my dental education. And then BU also has a ton of, I think they have every single postdoc residency that you could want to go into. So that also helps as a dental student, you get to go cycle through or shadow in any kind of, residency, which I thought was really fantastic, especially if you aren't totally sure, which avenue you might want to go into if you even want to specialize at all. So again, can't say enough wonderful things about BU. And if you've got specific questions, please reach out. So onto the Medical University of South Carolina. Again, this is where I did my ortho training. We are, again, located in downtown Charleston, South Carolina. The program here is a 34-month orthodontic residency. So the residents start July 1st and they finish up at the end of April, almost 3 years later. So they take 3 residents every single year. So there's 9 residents total. So compared to my 120 person dental student class, that's a super, super close knit group. which is great. I absolutely loved everybody that I did my residency with. Again, you're awarded a Master of Science in Dentistry. So that usually is tied to some kind of research that you have to do, some kind of thesis if you're getting a master's. And then we also got the certificate in orthodontics. Another great part about my program at MUSC was there was a big emphasis on ABO, which is the American Board of Orthodontics board certification. So there's two parts to it. There's a written test that you take during your second year of residency, and then there's an optional second part of that after you graduate that's more clinical based. But MUSC did an amazing job, getting us prepared for that exam, which I thought was a major strength. Also, this gentleman on the screen is named Dr. Tremont, Dr. Timothy Tremont. He is the program chair at the Ortho Residency at MUSC, and he is so wonderful. I can't thank him enough, honestly, for all of my orthodontic knowledge and the way that he teaches and prepared me and all of my co-residents was really pretty amazing. So again, if you've got any MUSC specific questions or Dr. Tremont specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I really feel like I hit the lottery a little bit with all my dental education. So I can talk about that for way too long. So a little bit more about why I chose ortho. I actually was one of the ones who went into dental school really, really wanting to do orthodontics. So the main reason for that was I actually had orthodontic surgery when I was a teenager. So if you're not familiar with that is, it's jaw surgery. So I had a really significant overbite. And I actually had it done during high school, which is kind of funny looking back, but my orthodontist really had to talk me into it and kind of coax me into going the surgical route. So I ended up having a really cool relationship with him throughout that whole process. And then the jaw surgery really changed my life, really, really, truly. So I kind of caught the bug early on just because I saw what it did in my life and, had to be able to help other people do that too. So again, wanted to do orthodontics, since high school. So I feel super lucky to be where I'm at today. So that's the biggest thing. But now that I'm in it, there's so many other things that I love. One of which is the treatment planning. I mean, I'm sure you've heard other orthodontists say, every case is kind of like a puzzle and it's like a challenge and it's trying to figure out the right answer for how you're going to treat the malocclusion. So I love kind of the mental gymnastics that you have to play to figure out, what the best treatment plan is. I don't think that'll ever get old. I hope it doesn't ever get old. So that's one of my favorite parts. I've already touched on relationships. Again, whether it's, co-residents or classmates or teachers or orthodontic equipment reps or whatever it may be. I feel like the relationships in this career, and that really carries over kind of to all parts of dentistry, are something really special that I love. I'm a people person for sure. So that's one of my favorite things, honestly. Also, I, like most dentists, really love aesthetics. And so it's a huge joy being able to, take something that looks kind of crazy, whether it be crowding or, a big overbite, and make it a lot more aesthetically pleasing. That's really, really rewarding part of the gig. And then also we just have happy patients for the most part. It's not like other parts of dentistry where they're coming to you because they're in a lot of pain. Most of the patients that we see are really motivated to get treatment with us, and then hopefully are super, super happy with the results. So I again saw, how life-changing it can be. So it's the coolest thing, when you take someone's braces off and they're just like totally shell-shocked by, how they look, and the self-esteem boost that you can give a lot of people is just really so cool. So that, in short, is why I got into orthodontics. So I'm going to do just a quick little case study. I know that some of these other presentations have gone more heavy on the clinical stuff. So again, I am doing a quick flip of it to prove that I'm an orthodontist, but really wanted to talk about just some of the stuff that I felt was beneficial for me when I was in your shoes. Is an orthodontic surgery case. Like I mentioned, it's one of the things that got me interested in orthodontics in the first place with my own. But this girl is one of my favorite cases that I've ever treated. And so I don't even have the full records, but I've just got a couple pictures to share with you guys. So this patient came to me as a freshman in high school. And she is such a beautiful girl, but she was always pretty self-conscious about, you can see in that frontal smiling photo, about the asymmetry that you can see with her lower jaw. And even despite that, with her personality and everything, I mean, she was gorgeous and bubbly and all the things, but this was something that we were really excited to be able to fix for her and address for her. So you can see in the picture of her teeth, and I should have included a side shot, but I didn't. The body oftentimes will sort of compensate when there's a big skeletal problem. So this patient had a skeletal problem. Her lower jaw was too far forward and it was a little bit asymmetrical. And so her teeth actually sort of compensated for that skeletal asymmetry. So her lower teeth ended up coming back really far so that she could still bite on her front teeth. And it's pretty amazing. You see a lot of, we call them compensations, but compensations in a lot of people's malocclusions, where the body just kind of makes the teeth fit together, sort of despite the issues that we may see with the jaw bones. So one of the things that we do before we send a patient to orthodontic surgery is remove all of those compensations. And the reason being is that you have to get the teeth exactly where they're supposed to be in the bone before you move the bone with surgery. So if we had just sent her to surgery with her lower teeth really, really tilted back like this, things would not have been fitting correctly when we went in to do the surgery. So you'll actually see, I have some pre-surgical photos, but her underbite gets a whole lot worse before we send her to surgery. And again, that's just because we're putting the teeth at the exact angle that they're supposed to be before we send her to surgery. So that's kind of one of the things that's a little bit weird about these surgery cases, because, patients are like, oh my gosh, you're making it worse. But that's really part of it. And that's kind of another cool piece of seeing how all the, puzzle pieces fit together. So this was pre-surgery. So you can see in her profile shot, you can tell that her lower jaw honestly looks like it's sticking out more. And part of that is because we now have uprighted the lower teeth. They're not tilted back like they were. And so it's actually giving more lip support. And so it makes the underbite look a lot worse. And then you can see in the dental photo, you can see that she is in much more of a crossbite there, meaning her bottom teeth are in front of her top teeth more significantly than they were when we started. So this was right before we sent her to surgery. Another thing I want to point out is if you look at the smiling clinical photo of her, you can see that it looks like her top jaw is at a bit of an angle. So that's something that we call a cant when it's at an angle like that. So her cant was one of the things that we also addressed with surgery. So she ended up having a 2-jaw surgery. We moved both the upper jaw and the lower jaw. And we got a really, really beautiful result. So you can see from the side, the front to back position of both jaws looks super balanced and beautiful. In her smiling photo, you can see that the asymmetry has, really been almost completely corrected, which is fantastic. She was thrilled. And then looking at the pictures of her teeth, you can just see that everything's fitting together so much better. So this helped functionally, it helped with her chewing and her eating, but it also just really changed something that she didn't like on the front end of things. And like I said, she had the best personality, throughout the whole process anyway, but we were just really thrilled with this result. So again, this is the kind of stuff that got me interested and probably will always keep me coming back, because you can really seriously change someone's life with orthodontics. It's crazy. So that's just my little blip of ortho. So I did want to talk a little bit about some job options. And this is not just for orthodontists. It's for, any dentist or any dental specialists. But there are a couple options that you have when you get out of either dental school or residency, when you finally are done with all the schooling and you just get to go work. And I'm in kind of a unique position because I'm doing a couple of these right now. So I thought it would be interesting to chat about. So the first would be to do a startup practice, meaning you are starting from scratch. It's completely your practice, but you are building it from the ground up, with building and the business. You also have the option to buy an existing practice. So you may find a doctor who is pretty much ready to retire. They own their own practice and they're ready to just sell it outright to you. So in a situation like that, you would be taking out, a practice loan to buy that practice. But then you would ultimately own the whole thing without actually building it from the ground up. You also have the option to go in as a partner. And what that means is that you would buy in, there's a million different ways to do it, but for example purposes, we can say that you would buy basically half of the practice and your partner would still own the other practice. And so you guys would be co-owners of this practice and oftentimes, share patients and things, which is a really cool option as well. And then you have options to, we call it associating, when you work sort of as an employee or an independent contractor, but you can be an associate or work in a private practice. So you're not owning the practice, but you are working as a doctor there in a private practice or in a corporate setting. So there are some corporate offices, some corporate ortho offices, and then some corporate dental offices that have ortho as a part of them. So I said I was, doing a little bit of both. So I actually did start my own practice here in Charleston. So I can speak a little bit about that. Started it from the ground up. So did all of the things that we can touch on a little bit. And then I'm also working a couple days a week as an associate in a corporate office, just until my practice is, busy enough to keep me here all the time. All right. So, this again is Charleston. That is our downtown, called King Street. You've got to visit if you've not been here. And then Holy City Orthodontics is my practice that I started. We actually just opened in September of this year, which is very funny, in the middle of a pandemic. So it has been an adventure, but a really great one. I cannot even tell you how much I feel like I've learned this year and how much I've grown this year as, a clinical orthodontist, but also a practice owner. So it's been a really great experience. So again, with a startup, you are doing everything. The pros and the cons are everything on this list. It's both a pro and a con. So you have to establish all systems. There's nobody telling you what to do, which is great because you can do it exactly like you want to do it. But it's also tough because there's nobody telling you how it should be done. So same with, building out an office. You work with the contractor, you work with the architect and the dental equipment specialist. And so you're making all those decisions, which is really fun, but also, I can't tell you how many calls that I got that were like, where do you want your compressed air in this room? And I was like, oh, I don't know. So it's funny, but it's fun. It's really exciting, but it's a lot too. So like I said, I think everything on this list is both a pro and a con. If you're starting up your own practice, or even if you are buying a practice, if you're going to be a practice owner, you're doing all of your own HR. So that means hiring and firing and payroll and all those kind of things that you don't really think about while you're in dental school. You're also in charge of marketing. Obviously, there are a bunch of amazing dental marketing firms that can help you with that, but ultimately it's on you to figure out, what's going to work best in your area or for your practice. The patient care, obviously you're still the doctor, and that feels sometimes like the smallest part of my day, which is kind of crazy. So again, practice management, we've already, touched on a couple things like that. And then the other interesting part about a startup that's kind of unique to this situation compared to some of the others we talked about is that you are taking on more debt to actually build out your office and set everything up with all of your equipment. It's less usually than buying an existing practice. When you're buying an existing practice, you are also buying the goodwill of the patients. And when you do a startup practice, you have no initial income. So, I mean, you're starting and hoping that the phone will ring on the first day. So that's different than if you were to buy an existing practice. Oftentimes, they have patients scheduled coming in on recall at least. So there's, some income usually if you go that route. So again, lots of pros and cons. This was a picture while I was in residency, actually, the day I signed my lease, and they somehow already had my signs up. So that was a really cool day. So these are just a couple pictures of my office. That is Cody. She's my employee. She's absolutely wonderful. She does a lot of the front desk and admin stuff. And because we're still so small, I really do most of the clinical stuff myself at this point, but we're hoping we'll grow soon. That's our waiting room. And then this is our clinic. You can see behind me, I'm still here. And then our consult room, and then another shot of our front desk there. So we are super proud of our office. We really love how everything turned out. Sorry, y'all, it keeps jumping back. So again, a little bit of advice, and I hope y'all don't feel like I'm on my soapbox, but again, this was just stuff that was helpful for me when I was in your shoes. But if you are going the startup route, whether it's for an ortho practice or a dental practice or what have you, I would highly recommend keeping an associate job while you're starting up. So kind of like I'm doing. I would love to be at my office all the time, but it has been really nice to know that I at least have a salary at my associate job. And so I can pay the bills for Holy City every month. And so, there's so much stress when you're learning a business and opening a business and running a business. So just like that safety blanket to know that you can at least pay your business bills is a really fantastic thing. So everyone I've talked to that's been kind of considering this, that's been one of my biggest pieces of advice. Also, you could consider a consultant. There are actually consultant firms that are made for startups, whether it be dental or ortho or what other specialty. And so if you're a little bit, you want to do the startup thing, but you're a little bit intimidated by how much goes into it, which again, so much goes into it. There are some consultants who, have done it before and can walk you through at least a checklist of, you need to get this done or reach out to this person or whatever. Another big piece of advice is to ask for help. It was humbling as I went through the whole process, even like I mentioned with the build out, like how much I didn't know. I found out kind of on the fly as I was going through the whole process. So don't be afraid to ask for help if you don't know what you're doing. It does not make you less competent or dumb or anything like that. If you don't know what you're doing, just ask, and you would be shocked at how many people are ready and willing to help you. Another one, and this is one of my favorites, is build a community. I already mentioned that one of my favorite parts of dentistry and ortho is really just the relationships you get to build. And that's not just with the patients. I mean, that's a really cool thing in itself. But again, with my reps and the other dentists in my area and all of my colleagues from residency or dental school, I mean, it's a really cool community that you get to be a part of. I actually am in a group with like 8 other girls across the country who opened startup ortho practices this past year, which is so random and funny, but they have been the most amazing resources. And so we will get on our group text and just chat about, hard cases or cool products or things like that. So community is king when you're doing something like this. So, and then lastly, again, have fun. That is, my advice for while you're in dental school, while you're working, while you're in residency, just really enjoy it. Like you realistically have worked your butt off to get wherever you're going to end up. So enjoy it. It's a really, really cool career, and it's very rewarding. So a couple little pieces of advice if you're going to go the associate route, which again is fantastic. I would just highly recommend that you have a lawyer read over any kind of employment contract. They know what to look for, whether it be, I don't know, how to break your contract if you needed to, or whatever it may be. It's really worthwhile to have someone who knows the language to come through, because those can be overwhelming. Another thing that I would recommend is work where you want to live. Oftentimes you can find maybe more pay out in a super rural area. But in my experience, it's really worth, again, you've worked so hard to get to where you are. So, have the life that you wanted, and the money and everything else will follow. So I feel like it's important to pick where you want to be and then work from there. And then again, about a contract, just ask all the questions you can think of before you actually sign. That's, again, something a lawyer could help you with, but you want to know, how many patients you'd be responsible for, if you're responsible for stuff like lab fees. You want to know how much autonomy you'll have while you're practicing, all that kind of stuff. And then my last slide, I promise I'm almost done boring you guys, but I said advice to anything students. So this could be pre-dental, pre-ortho, any specialty. Obviously grades and test scores are huge. Unfortunately, I wish we could glaze over that, but that. And so do what you can while you're, in undergrad and in dental school to get the best grades and test scores that you can. Research is something that, most programs, whether it be dental school or residency, are interested in. They want to know that, even if you haven't done your own research project, that you've been involved to some extent. So I feel like that's super helpful. Again, relationships and connections are huge. So go out and meet people. I know it's tough now in your community, but I think you'd be surprised at how many local dentists or specialists would be more than happy to sit down and talk with you. Like I said, anyone can reach out to me. I'm super happy to talk to anyone. Exposure is another big one. I mean, if you go on your interviews for dental school or for residency, the people interviewing you are going to know, or going to want to know, why you really want to be in dentistry or in whatever specialty. And so the more you can speak to specific experiences that you had, or offices that you went in, or things that you saw, or case, stuff like that, all of that really, really helps. So the more exposure you can have, I feel like the more you can speak to why you want to be in that role. Recommendations are also huge. And on the specific topic of recommendations, make sure whoever you're asking for, really knows who you are. Krupa and I were talking about this before we actually got started, but I know it's really tough for you guys now because you're doing a lot of digital classes. And so that's really kind of tough. But if you're able, really ask for recommendations from people who know you and could give you a strong recommendation, because there's a big difference between a strong personal recommendation that a faculty will send and then one that clearly is from someone that they don't even know the student for. So that's something to consider when you're applying. And then I mentioned this early. I love the idea of applying to a lot of schools, really casting a broad net. But that being said, really only apply to places that you would go. Again, Ryan and I wanted to come back down south when it was time for us to apply. So we made a list, but we really looked at every school and said, okay, if we match there, we're going there, we're going to be happy there. So don't apply to 50 schools just because you can, but know that you would never ever go to some place. Don't waste your money and your resources, but do, within reason, apply to a lot of schools. And also, again, I am from the Carolinas. I'm back in the Carolinas. But I did get away for dental school in Boston, and it was one of the coolest things that I've ever done. So if you're up for it, I'm a big proponent of that too. I just feel like I grew up so much when I moved away, and you can always come home. So that's another kind of fun little piece of advice. And then again, I know I've said this a million times, but really enjoy yourself. You are going to work hard. There's no doubt about it. But enjoy the people that you're with, enjoy the process. You're doing something really incredible for your own future and for your family's future. So just try not to take it all too seriously in the process. All righty. And then as promised, this is all my contact info. this email address will come straight to me. So if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. And then we are at Holy City Orthodontics on Instagram and Facebook and Pinterest and whatever else. So you are more than welcome to reach out and ask any kind of questions. Again, I've been helped by so many people to get to where I am today. So I'm more than happy to pay it forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson, for offering us all of this help and explaining your experiences and your insight. It's really valuable information to learn how you've gone through your experiences. I think now Kathleen will go ahead and read the questions from the chat.
Yes. So our first question is, how hard is it to find an existing practice?
I don't know. That's a tough one. So if you're feeling really particular about where you want to practice, it's probably a little bit trickier because the timing has to work out that you're finding, a doctor who's ready to sell. But it's honestly something that you can keep an eye on the entire time that you're in dental school or the entire time that you're in a residency program. Some people, like their first year of residency, already know that maybe it's their orthodontist growing up wants to sell in 2 or 3 years, and so maybe you start that conversation really, really early. So I feel like the earlier you start, the better, because it's not just practices aren't for sale all day every day like on Zillow. But I think if you again build a community and let it be known by even dental reps, they're a huge resource for something like that you're interested in buying. Say I was like, I really want to buy a practice in my hometown in Charlotte. Maybe I could tell all the reps my first year of residency, hey, I'll be there in 3 years. I want to buy. Can you keep an eye out? And so stuff like that is super helpful. But it's not super easy. But I think ultimately, if you're willing to be flexible and or patient, you can find what you're looking for.
How long did the case study take to complete?
Her case from start to finish was like right at 1 year and a couple months. It was actually pretty quick. So that's one of the nice things with surgery cases. Generally, you try to keep them in braces for only maybe 1 year before surgery, send them to surgery, and then you try to get everything, really wrapped up 6 months after surgery. So it's kind of great because the surgery itself does a lot of the really big moves that are oftentimes the hardest ones for us to accomplish with ortho. So they're putting, your jawbones exactly where we want them. So then we just have to get the teeth fitting together. So oftentimes the surgery cases can end up being a little bit quicker than a traditional ortho case, which is kind of cool.
Would you say that orthodontics is worth the extra financial burden compared to going straight into general dentistry?
For me, it was, like I said, I always wanted to do ortho. So it was, dental school was part of my process to get there. It is more money and it's more time that you're not making money. So all of those things add up. But you can also consider that oftentimes specialists make more money on the back end of things compared to general dentists. And that's not a hard and fast rule. Everyone has different circumstances. But there is also theoretically a bigger opportunity to make more money after as a specialist.
What is orthodontic residency like? Is there like a lot of physics and math involved? Because I've heard that sometimes.
No. So biomechanics is like the most science heavy part of your ortho education, but differently than dental school, you really don't have a lot of like sit down classes once you're in residency. A lot of it is learning kind of on the go, and you're learning from your co-residents and you're talking through cases. And so we used to sit down, all 9 of us together with Dr. Tremont, and just run through cases. Maybe it's a case that I was working on, and we would have, initial photos and progress photos and final photos, and we would talk about how we treated them, what we treated them with, what the treatment outcomes were. And then you can bring in parts of conversation about, what biomechanics allowed this movement to happen while you were treating them. So it's a much more like comprehensive approach to how you learn in residency. It's not dental school. You are unfortunately going to have classes where you're sitting down in lecture and learning and taking tests. And ortho is much more learn from experience, which was nice because I was a little bit done with the classroom after dental school. So
when you were building your own practice, what were some unexpected things that you wish you had considered?
Some unexpected things. The cost stuff was maybe the most overwhelming. I'm a big planner, and so I had everything planned out, I thought, to a T. So I still managed to be surprised at things I never thought of. One of the biggest ones, and this sounds so silly and minuscule, but we were doing our build out and they were putting up my walls on like a Wednesday. And they called me on Tuesday and they were like, so which IT company did you have like run all of your wiring? And I was like, oh, I didn't do that. I didn't know I had to do that. So there were so many things. Like I said, you just don't know what you don't know until you find out that you don't know it. So I had a couple little hiccups like that. Nothing super massive, but probably cost and then just things that I hadn't considered would have been the most surprising. But again, it was super rewarding and super cool that I got to do everything exactly like I wanted to. That's still a pretty surreal thing for me, but I learned a lot. So
the design of your office is beautiful. It's like super modern.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you design it yourself?
I did. Yep.
Oh, nice. That's nice.
Thank you.
I really do like it. The TV's there. You use that like to distract the kids.
Yep, exactly.
Do you have a lot of kids?
Yeah, we're pretty much like half and half right now with adults and kids. So it's a good mix, but kids are a lot of fun.
That's good.
Yeah.
When did you start studying for the DAT?
When did I start studying? Oh gosh, y'all are taking me back. I honestly have no idea. It was probably a couple months, but I don't totally remember. That's really bad. It feels like a lifetime ago. I will say though that when I was in dental school over the summer, I taught one of those like Kaplan courses for the DAT. So I got back into it. Those courses, I never took one when I was studying for it, but was on the other side of things. Once I was in dental school, I thought it was super helpful. They keep you on a pretty tight schedule with, which chapters you have to be reading each week before you go in for class. So if you need a little bit more accountability in your studying, I thought that was really neat that it keeps you on a schedule and make sure that you cover all the topics. But I don't actually necessarily remember how long I studied.
Do you think the amount of patients who choose to get traditional braces have been decreasing?
Actually, no. I've been so surprised that I've had like a lot of adult females want ceramic braces, which I'm shocked by. But I've really seen a pretty even number of people who are interested in clear aligners versus braces. I feel like if I was going into treatment today, I would want clear aligners, and I feel like they've come such a long way. I mean, the things that we can do with clear aligners are similar, and in some scenarios, they're even better than braces for certain movements that we need to make. So I feel like I would go clear aligners, but I really haven't seen a huge decline in the braces like I would have expected, to be honest.
Did you have a mentor throughout your journey?
I did. I probably had a couple of mentors, to be honest. Like I said, my orthodontist who had to kick and scream to get me to go through with my jaw surgery was a huge resource. Even during college, I would go home every summer and work in his office. So that was one of the ways that I worked on getting my exposure up, because I was just in the office and doing, records or taking impressions or things like that for him. So if you can set up something like that, it was, so valuable. Definitely had, some other mentors while I was in dental school, and then certainly Dr. Tremont in ortho. But MUSC, we were really lucky to have incredible faculty, not even just Dr. Tremont, but all of our part-time docs who would come in were all also in private practice. So they would come in on some of their off days when they were not at their own offices and teach us. And so they're all still my mentors. I feel like I can reach out to them for anything, even though some of them are, right down the road now, which is really cool. Like I said, people in dentistry and ortho are, for the most part, just really, really wonderful people. So if there's anyone that you want to mentor you, just ask, and I'd be shocked if they said no, honestly.
Is it true that orthodontics is one of the most competitive specialties to get into?
It is competitive. Yeah. It is. I mean, I think a lot of residencies are, though. I mean, oral surgery is probably up there too with one of the more competitive ones. And so again, that's not the glamorous part. You've got to have good grades and you've got to have good test scores. But if you can just stick with that part, it really is worth it. I've absolutely loved it. But yes, I think it is a little bit more competitive.
That's good. Approximately how long does it take from when you graduate the ortho residency to having your own practice? How long until it's stable and done already?
So I started getting everything ready for my office while I was still in residency. So I probably signed my lease in November of my last year of residency, and then we opened in September. So the whole process took less than a year, but more than 6 months, somewhere in between, to get totally off the ground. I think my construction itself took 4 months, from the day we actually broke ground to the day that they handed me the final keys and product. But I finished my residency in June and opened in September. And the opening in September was really just a product of when my construction was going to be done. So it depends when you start, honestly. You can do it even quicker than I did.
That's cool. Let's see, another question. Let's see.
I had a question.
Sure.
What do you think are some pros and cons of working in your own practice versus, I guess, a corporate practice, since you have experience in both?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think autonomy is one of the biggest things. In my practice, I get to decide exactly which brackets and wires and things like that I use. I can use whatever appliances I want. I just get, full say over all that. In a corporate setting, and even if you were working in a private practice too, either the owner doc or the corporation kind of gets to decide a lot of those things. I'm kind of lucky in my corporate office too, though. I'm the only orthodontist there, so I do still get a lot of autonomy, which I like. Some people, when they come out of residency, don't want that autonomy, which is totally fine. But again, those are all the questions that you ask before you sign a contract. So that was a benefit for me. I really wanted to just be able to go in and practice the way that, I've been trained. But autonomy is probably the biggest difference between the two. Other than that, it's the ownership versus being an employee thing. So at my associate job, I show up, the doctor, I do the orthodontics, and then I go home. So I don't deal with any of the business aspect of anything. I mean, even all the hiring and firing and all that, someone else does. I literally just show up and do orthodontics. Whereas at my own practice, I've got all of the other hats to wear. So that's another really big difference.
Did you ever consider another specialty?
I didn't. Like I said, I was pretty gung-ho on ortho since high school, which is so ridiculous. So I didn't, but I know plenty of people who, changed what they were expecting when they either got into dental school and got experience in some other specialties, or didn't end up doing what they initially thought that they were going to do and ended up being super happy. But I think that all comes back to, again, like the exposure, just really get your feet wet and figure out, what you want to be in. I think me working in my orthodontist office for all those years in the summer, like I had so much exposure to ortho. And so I knew, even from high school that I wanted to do it, but then also going in and working there for so many summers just kind of solidified that for me. So get as much exposure as you can. And if you're on the fence, do it in a lot of different offices, just kind of get the experience in a lot of places, and you'll figure out, what you're drawn to for sure.
How did you manage like the business aspect of your private practice? Did you have like some help along the way? Because I can imagine it's difficult.
It has been difficult. No, didn't really. I didn't end up hiring a consultant. So I've done a lot of it myself. And again, a lot of it was just figuring it out as I went and asking for help when I got to a place that I didn't have an answer. We had like a lawyer went through my whole lease agreement, which was super helpful because she had questions to ask that I never would have thought to ask. My dental equipment specialist was so helpful when we were figuring out the floor plan of everything, just for where stuff, like I mentioned before, like compressed air would go. I mean, just there's so much that you don't know, but I was really lucky that I had, I kept calling them my dream team, but they were really, really so good to me. And just when I got to a point that I didn't know what to do, I at least knew who to ask to get the answer. So I didn't necessarily have any help with the business stuff. And I am not a pro on it by any means. Like I said, we just opened in September, so I'm still learning every single day. But I feel like I have people that I can ask for help when I need it, which is often.
That's good. Do you have to deal a lot with like behavior management of like young patients who are resistant to getting orthodontic treatment?
Honestly, no. That's one of the nice things about ortho is if you're in a pediatric dentistry setting, oftentimes kids coming in have, a need that has to get done. Maybe they have a big cavity and the tooth has to get extracted or it needs to get filled or whatever. And that's for their health and well-being. Ortho, if we have a kid come in where maybe they would benefit from ortho right at that moment, but they're having a lot of behavioral issues, we don't have to start right now. There's sort of less of a tight timeline with ortho. And that's not to say that, if we're doing an expander of the top jaw, like that works better at certain ages. So I'm not saying it's completely random, but if we have, really tough behavioral issues, we don't necessarily have to jump into treatment right then. We can wait until the patient either feels more comfortable with us or just matures a little bit. So that's kind of nice too, that most of the kids that we treat are really well behaved because we don't start treatment until they're really well behaved, if that makes sense.
Yes. Do most orthodontic residencies pay you or are they not paid?
No, actually most of them don't. I think there's like maybe a handful that do. So that's tough. But again, like do all your research before you're applying. I got really lucky. MUSC has a very affordable tuition. So compared to my dental school tuition, I was like, wow, this is great. I feel like I'm getting paid, even though I wasn't. So
okay, so dental school is more than the residency.
Mine was. That's not always the case. So that's the whole private versus public versus in-state versus, all those things. So just do your research, and most of the schools have all of that published, on their website, or you can get the information. So make that a part of when you're making your list of where you're going to apply. Make that part of it if the financials are something that really stresses you out, because you can have all that information on the front end. And if tuition is something that really, really scares you, then don't apply to the ones that are really, really super expensive. You get to be in the driver's seat a little bit with that kind of stuff.
Do you think that minoring in business management or something similar could help if you want to open your own practice?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, again, I'm learning so much on the fly. And my husband Ryan's been super helpful because he works in business. So there's, certain things like that I take for granted. But yeah, I would think that would be a huge help for sure.
That's good. Did your dental school have like some business clubs to help people who wanted to start like a private practice?
We didn't have any clubs that I remember. They might at this point. I'm not totally sure, to be honest, but we did take some classes about business that were super helpful, that would dive a little bit more into buying a practice versus being an associate. So there are definitely classes in dental school that talk about, everything we just kind of talked about, which is really helpful. But again, I think one of your best resources, if you're deciding if you want to open or work as an associate or whatever it might be, is just going out and meeting people in the roles. Go to some of your dentists around town and talk to the ones who are working as associates and find out what they like or don't like about that. Go to some of the ones who did a startup and ask what they like or don't like. Go to some of the people who bought a practice and ask what they like or don't like. I think that's one of the best ways to figure out, really from a grassroots way of what you're going to be happiest doing.
Do you have any concerns around the number of GPs learning and performing ortho in their practices or DTC solutions?
Yes and no. I've found, at least in my experience so far, is that if you can prove that you really are a specialist in your field, that even some of the docs who are doing ortho as general dentists will still refer their really hard cases. So I think there's plenty of patients to go around, honestly. So I think you just need to focus on doing the best work that you can do, really being a professional and a source of information for all the people that you practice around, and then the patients will come. So it's not been a huge stressor for me, basically. The direct to consumer thing it's interesting. It's concerning, but I totally understand why people are interested in doing it. Oftentimes it does feel like a cheaper option, which interestingly is not necessarily always the case. So I always tell people, ortho consults are free at almost every single ortho office in the country. So if you're interested in any of that, go talk to somebody and really find out what the prices would be before you do something like that. There just are too many things that can go wrong. A lot of the direct to consumer companies don't take x-rays ahead of time, and you just never know what's going on, in the bone underneath your teeth and stuff. And it's, you're taking a really big risk. So ortho consults are free. I just always recommend going to, talk to somebody who really knows what they're doing. But again, I think there's plenty of patients to go around in the grand scheme of things. So neither of those aspects really stress me out too much.
Yeah. Did you do any type of research in undergraduate or no?
I did not do any in undergrad, okay. Literally none. That master's program that I did at BU, I did a thesis. So I got my master's and have my thesis from that. So that was something helpful as I was applying to dental school. I did my research in facial abnormalities in patients with fetal alcohol syndrome. So that was kind of neat. And then I didn't do my own research project in dental school necessarily. I helped on some of the other ortho residents projects while I was there. So that was my little bit of exposure there. And then I did do my own research in ortho residency because you have to.
Oh, you have to? Wow. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Okay, well, that's all the questions we have for today. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Anderson.
Oh my gosh, y'all are so welcome. It was really nice meeting you. And again, kudos to you guys. This is such a cool organization. It's really neat what you guys are doing. But again, please feel free to contact me, anyone with any kind of questions. I'm happy to help. And it was super nice spending a Wednesday with you all.
Thank you so much. It was very nice meeting you, Dr. Anderson, and learning everything from you. And thank you so much for answering all of our questions. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. Make sure you check out Dr. Anderson's Instagram and all of her socials. And as she mentioned, feel free to reach out to her if you have any questions. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your night. Bye, everyone.